12. Link. Same team, different faces. Yeah, welcome, Bill. Right, do you, given that you're the face that's changed, do you want to preface anything, Bill?
I don't know any worship. I'd be happy to if you'd like, but I don't feel that there's anything that really, really needs to be said.
Nothing you want to add? Right, then I'll open up questions. Councillor McCash.
I'm wondering whether you guys have seen the provisional EDU budget, which is in another one of our papers, which allocates $30,000 to energy plan development in this next financial year. And if so, does that fulfil the needs of recommendation 2?
I think what we would like to see a separation of is development of the energy plan versus implementation, and we'd requested 30k for next year from the EDS budget for energy plan development. I think, is it 30? And then we were also thinking that you could be advocating for early spend through the EDS budget on early implementation actions of the energy plan. So I think we're just sort of trying to make a clean divide between development of the plan versus implementation.
And implementation of the plan, would that commence this coming financial year or in the 15-16 year?
I think what we were saying in the report is that we really are working to try and get the energy plan signed off by the end of 2014. So you've got a period of time which doesn't currently have a budget for implementation in the next financial year.
Other than $160,000?
Well,
Councillor Hawkins.
Asked and answered. Thank you.
Oh, it's been answered. Councillor Wilson.
I'm just unclear, but maybe I didn't pick up the detail as to the quantum.
Well, I can come back to you if you like. There's a question.
Yeah, no, it is the quantum that's is being needed for number 2.
So the staff was saying at the moment there's $30,000 for the finalisation of the development of the plan, and they're not sure of the quantum. There'd been discussion about 50,000. At the moment there's the 160,000 from the previous resolution, which will be carried forward. So between, they'll go to the economic development strategy and pitch and say this is what we think it will deliver for the city, and the EDS partners weigh that up against other calls on the fund.
Informed by an actual energy plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wasn't sure of the quantum, but that's because we're still doing the plan.
Yeah.
Sorry. The other question I have, and I'm sorry, Your Worship, I didn't listen astutely enough to you when you said the savings or the underspends in budgets this year. Presuming that the 50,000 that is talked about in Resolution 1 is already in the plan,
yes.
What was the savings in this current year on the CEO's budget that you quantified earlier on?
That was a combination of my discretionary fund, the CEO's, and a little bit of civic that Sandy doesn't know about because she's out of the country.
We took it.
40 altogether.
She volunteered it.
We're talking small amounts.
Okay.
But that's a total.
Thank you.
Councillor Staines. Oh, sorry. Oh, Councillor Calvert. I'm sorry I got out of order here.
Sorry, this is just not me understanding processes. Is this the staff here recommending to council to advocate to the steering group, who I don't understand where that is, to recommend back to the council that something happens in a proportion that we don't yet know about, should be put in a budget somewhere? Sorry, I'm just completely...
Yeah, I can answer this. The Economic Development Strategy Steering Group, the Grow Dunedin Partnership, contains a council representative. You are, by this resolution, saying to that council representative, we as a council think that this stuff matters because it's part of the Economic Development Strategy, and we want you to be clear about that as part of that steering group, as our representative, when you make your decisions about how you allocate funding for economic development initiatives.
So that's to the Grow Dunedin thing. Is there a proportion that's suggested, or when you say a proportion, if you went to advocate a proportion, would you not want to have some idea what that proportion
Well,
is?
We've had to do a budget forecast. It's in your report on the EDS strategy budget. So I can't, like, off the top of my head recall what's in it, but we had to put in what we were asking for and for what for next year's budget, what we anticipate to ask for.
Basically, we had a resolution to come back and say what we thought was needed and whether we needed to add any to the budget. Effectively, what we said was some of this is economic development strategy initiatives for energy implementation, and therefore it should come out of that budget. So therefore, we're not going to ask you to add extra money to the budget. We think there's a funding pool that's an appropriate place to go. So we don't need any extra. That's really the point of this one. We think we can do it within existing resources, given the calls on your budget this time around.
Councillor Staines and then Councillor Reynolds.
Just clarification. The Chief Executive we voted, assuming we endorse it, $50,000 towards in-house. The development of the strategy is funded from the economic development strategy for 30,000, is that correct?
For next year, yeah.
Yep. And so this is asking that consideration to be given to a further sum on top of that 30,000 towards a specific project that comes from that strategy.
Potentially.
At this point in time, what we're thinking of in terms of early actions will, I think, in the main be ones where we need to just facilitate things happening. And so I imagine that we will be asking EDS steering group for money to spend possibly on keeping a staff resource for that period on early implementation of the energy plan, because I think that's what that early stage will need. It's going to need a person pushing some things.
I don't have any problem with it, just that roughly looking across the projects, there's about 45,000. If we shared it evenly between each of the themes that have major projects running in, it's going to be about 45,000 per theme area, assuming they all stack up as being of equal value.
Yeah.
So I just tag it with that. I support it, and I'm happy to move the resolutions, but there is a ceiling.
We're very aware it's a contestable fund, that fund.
Right. Councillor Vance.
I'm concerned at what I see as the increasingly fluffy wording in recommendations. My understanding when I joined council was that we were supposed to be a decision-making group, and I've since been disabused of that ideal preconception. But to then say that the council is going to consider adopting the draft annual plan proposal to allocate, why doesn't the council simply approve the adoption of the draft annual plan?
I think that's the implication. It could be better written, but the recommendation is that council adopt.
Yes. So
Take out the word considers.
Yes.
So we get rid of the word considers. Thank goodness for that, because we've done our considering. Let's just do something here. And then of course there's number 2, where not only are we going to consider it, but we're only going to consider advocating. Now, with all due respect to advocates, advocating is just so wimpy that in this context, I just can't believe that we're going to consider advocating.
No,
and then
consider it.
Okay, all right, so we approve then.
Stiffened it up already, councillor.
All right, okay. A little stiffness sounds really good here. Thank goodness. The flaccid nature of these recommendations is really getting to me. So we've got rid of that. But then Councillor Calvert's suggestion that a proportion of, are we really actually saying anything in recommendation 2 at all? Would it not be better simply not to have recommendation 2 because it's A, so wimpy, and B, has an unspecified proportion anyway? Surely the economic development steering Economic Development Strategy Steering Group is going to do what it's going to do. And if we're going to advocate to it, to me that's almost like abdicating our responsibility. I think the Economic Development Strategy should do whatever it needs to do. It should, on the basis of whatever evidence it has, come back to us, and that we should just drop recommendation number 2 altogether. I could then vote happily for number 1. Thank you.
Councillor Staines, you indicated you were prepared to move.
Yep, I'll just get a couple of amendments.
So that they will read the council adopts and the council advocates, rather than consider.
Yeah, it takes some energy funding to forming the rumour.
Let's go right.
Best to say we're getting you a jumper.
Which just proves politics makes strange bedfellows.
We give you a jumper as well.
Nothing wrong with that, man.
So is there a...
I think we're going to have some fun.
Councillors, the motions are on the screens, and I need a seconder. It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hawkins. Right, discussion. Councillor Staines, do you wish to speak to it in the first instance?
No, I'll say right.
Speak to Councillor McTavish.
Just very briefly, I think that in an ideal world we would be budgeting more for this project, but it's not currently an ideal situation, so I think we have to make the most of what we can, and I'm really heartened, for example, by things like the Chamber of Commerce's submission, which does place increasing emphasis on this area, and they being part of the Grow Partnership, I have faith that they will bring those views to that table as well. So yeah, so I'm hopeful that this isn't a meaningless motion. I think it has got meaning, and I look forward to seeing how things progress, noting that they also have budget constraints and multiple projects that they're trying to balance.
No further discussion?
I just, in support of the motions, just point out that there is, within those projects that fall under the Grow Dunedin Partnership, there is strong support for the energy-based projects, and I have no doubt that if a proposal to enact something that gets us down the path is put up, that based on the budget constraints it would get supported. We're trying to drive all of the projects as hard as we can, and the energy project offers us some great opportunities, so I'm sure it would be looked on favourably.
Councillor Hall.
It's a shock.
Yeah, it's more of a shock since you're speaking after the last speaker.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. Do you mind if I speak? To add to the energy efficiency, could council, with developers, get them to put LED lighting into their subdivisions now, and rather than put standard lights in and got to be changed again, because there is a few subdivisions running at the present time.
I think that could be framed into an excellent resolution. So hold that, and what I suggest is that council considers asking planning staff to, at some point, report back on the possibility of doing exactly that. Well, can you hold that thought, Councillor Van, because we're in the middle of it.
Just on that.
Yes, I know, but we'll come to another resolution. Because what I'm suggesting is that you move something after this one.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to that discussion. So this, I'm going to put this. All those. Does anyone want me to split it up? Right.
Yeah, I just want to vote against 2.
Sorry?
I just want to vote against 2.
Oh, right, okay. I'll put 1. So the first part, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. The second part, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded, please.
Carried. Thank you. Now, oh, good. Councillor Vanderbilt, do you want to see this?
LED lighting in the standard.
But it's code of subdivision, there's one climate change, and it's much harder. And then you can't do this change. Code of
In terms of the standard that you're raising.
It's a bit water. And
Well, you got something.
Your movement, I'll just
We'll just get it up on the screen and then we can open up discussion.
It's a problem I'm trying to work through.
in relation on the new developments, we've put developers governance. The ability I haven't heard. I mean, the problem is code of subdivision, that you're asking the higher stamp from the code of subdivision.
Right, Councillor Brest, to report back on the ability of council to encourage or require to install LED. Would encourage or require to install LED street lighting in.
Yeah, that's on
Councillor Hall, can you cast your eyes over that and see if you still want to move it?
Yep, that looks right.
Councillor Vandis, you indicated you would second it, so you're happy with that? Cool. Righto. Discussion. Councillor Hall, do you wish to speak to it now or at the end?
I think by doing this, the city's going to get a lead onto savings, and we can actually, it gives us something to monitor rather than be told what we're going to do. It gives us a chance to monitor something.
Speakers, Councillor Wilson.
I'm going to support this partly because we can't impose it to council here. This matter is governed under the Code of Subdivision, which is a bylaw, and as such would have to go through a change in the bylaw standard. We're imposing or encouraging a much higher standard here, but I think it's one that developers would like to buy into and support. I think the only part that's missing, but I'm sure will happen when staff report back, is the staff finding a process to get the savings that you talked about in purchasing, that standardises the type of LED lighting we might have in Dunedin. So if I really thought about that further, I'd be encouraging the staff to report back on the standards that we would encourage developers to have, because we need to know what we're asking them to put in. And so you may want to amend your motion, Lee and Doug, to say that we have to have that work done to impose it on developers or request of developers.
We'll do it at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, this encompasses that. Further speakers, Councillor Carroll.
Can we ask whether, if it has any significant cost to developers, what the effect of saying that they can contra that against a possible development fund contribution would be? Yeah. In a spend to save sort of spirit.
Further speakers. Councillor Block.
Following on from the doctor in charge of the museum these today, Griffin, would we possibly look at adding a requirement to looking at light pollution as an add-on?
Maria?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing actually. Through the energy plan, we're looking at a night sky city action and that's what I was talking about when I was saying we want to leverage from the street lighting work that's planned. So yes, and we've contacted Dr. Griffin about it, so I think we're really interested.
Councillor Hall.
I just had a question. I wasn't sure, I picked up in a meeting a few weeks ago, but is the light that comes from LED lights worse than the current form for light pollution? Is that Dr. Griffin's concern, or is it just any light at night's a problem?
You're on the edge of my knowledge, but to the best of my knowledge, it's about the new LED lighting being able to point the light down, so you don't get pollution going up. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Vandis has probably got more knowledge of this than most of us.
There are two issues here. One of them is light direction that's just been referred to, and the other one's light frequency. The nice thing about sodium lights that we have, those orange ones, they have a very narrow frequency band which astronomers can use a special filter for to filter out. So that's an advantage even though it's spraying everywhere. Most of the new LED lights have a much wider frequency band, hence you can't filter them out as easily, but also most of them are potentially far more directional. That is to say, they can put the light just where you want it. Now, this wasn't true of the very first LEDs that came out. If you've been flying over Bangkok any time in the last probably 10 years, you'll see whole suburbs where you've got these horrible, brilliant white LEDs basically shining up in your eyes because they just sprayed everywhere. Most of the street lighting these days is very directional, and I don't think that, I think it'll be a significant improvement actually.
Any further discussion? Well, I'm going to support this. I think it's an excellent suggestion, and I don't think there's I think that we may end up changing the standard for subdivision, because if the rest of the city, if we make the rest of the city put it over to LED, it would be silly to allow new developments to use antiquated technology that didn't fit. So naturally you'd want consistency, and especially insofar as I was going to say energy in the long run. We don't allow people to put 19th century coal ranges in their homes that belch out smoke anymore when newer cleaner models are available. So I think that it may end up going down that track. Do you want to write a reply, Councillor Hall? Right, I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you all. Righto, councillors, we'll get underway. It's 9 o'clock. We're starting with the Forsyth Bar Stadium 2014-15 budget, item 8. And welcome to Mr Davies. Come, are you coming too? Please take a seat at the end of the table, Terry. Welcome, Terry. And I think this may be the first time have you been before with council before?
No, this is the first time.
Well, big welcome.
Thank you.
To council. Now, we have the reports in front of us, councillors. Items 8 and 9. We'll start with 8. Is there anything either you or Grant would like to preface questions with? Or?
I guess the key thing here is that this is an interim step. As everyone's aware, we're doing the review of the stadium and we're due to get that back mid-year. I would like to hope that this was not a surprise to council, because the statement of intent that was provided in February clearly indicated that DVML was going to have a loss in the coming financial year. So what we're trying to do is have an interim solution, which is what we've presented here today. I guess on that note I'll now be quiet and have any questions.
Okay. Anything you want to preface it with, Terry?
Not at all. I'll just wait to if there's any questions from the floor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Vance.
You mentioned the statement of intent just now, Grant. And in relation to budget issues, in my experience as a councillor, we've had nothing but with DVML since it started. Since the stadium opened, the statement of intent has been, as I see it, roundly ignored. Under the statement of intent, we were supposed to be advised if there were going to be any purchases made over $1 million. One of the first things DVML did, as I understand it, is go out and buy $1.2 million worth of temporary seating and tell us about it afterwards. We were asked whether or not we were going to fund road lights for the turf.
Councillor, can I just ask, is a question, and B, does it relate to the period that we're talking about? Because both of the gentlemen at the end of the table, well, what the issues you're talking about predate both of them, and they predate this budget time. So is it a question, and is it relevant to this budget?
Right, I'm sorry, I'm getting to it, but there's quite a bit in this. There's millions of dollars, and there's a wee bit of, there's what I'm trying to point out here is that regarding the statement of intent, that it was just suggested now that it actually is worth something. In the past it hasn't been, from my perspective. Also in terms of the continual going...
Please come to the question.
Okay. The question is, why should we again bail out DVML when in the past they failed to honour their statement of intent, they failed to take direction from council? They're supposed to be a council-controlled organisation. In fact, they're an organisation out of control. And recently, I've had information that you spent $1.3 million on a second set of TV screens. Again, completely, as I see it, outside what should be allowed. Why should we keep bailing out an organisation that simply blows money here, there and everywhere? Overseas tours,
Right, we'll let Councillor, you've asked the question.
Look, I'll answer it. And look, I'm not going to delve on history here. You know, even taking the role down here, you know, we understood the dynamics of getting a stadium up and look, I've not been involved in a greenfield site stadium, but certainly a stadium that has to go through redevelopment when under pressure for major events. So historically, and all the elements that happened through getting the stadium up and what happened, yeah, I'm not even going to comment. In terms of moving forward, I think there is a number of things we've identified with the business that need sharpening up. Certainly process, as Paul. Is that through history? Maybe. We've got to understand that the venue's relatively new. That first period was chaos. It would have been chaotic. And what we're saying now is a time to consolidate, relook at process practice. Let's get everything out on the table. Let's budget correctly. Let's engage people we've got, and let's look at a review on getting the right people in the right place to move forward. And I'm absolutely confident that we're going through a revised process on budget at the moment, and the numbers we'll deliver down on that. Our first target is to achieve that, and I'm confident we'll do that. I think historically there's been a disconnect through management numbers, DCC, and we've got to fix that.
So, Mr. McKenzie, can I ask you to address the other part of Councillor Van der Vis's question, which is the imperatives around why we need to balance the budget?
Well, I think I would like to say it's quite obvious, because if we don't, we have a cash flow issue for the company, which would make it insolvent, which would then create a bigger issue for us.
Right, but if we do, doesn't it encourage them to go out next year and buy another $1.3 million worth of TV sets that they didn't need in the first place? If we do bail them out, doesn't this basically just mean that the history that Terry has just said he'd rather put into the background is simply going to continue? You know,
Can you let them answer the question, Councillor?
I guess the first comment I'd say is that when we did that first budget early on for the draft statement of intent, we tried to get a realistic budget in front of the council, which was indicating that was the potential loss for the coming year. I would like to hope that we bring in greater transparency across the council and council companies, so that you are more informed, so that you are able to make better decisions. And this is all part of that process.
Just through the chair, we're committed to that. I mean, I would honestly say that there will be a shift in terms of that transparency, not only to DCC, but to all of our stakeholders and the community. I think this is about us opening our doors to say we want to get this right, and we want to move forward.
Okay, regarding the transparency, Mr. Davies, I wrote to a public information request some time ago requesting to have proof of payment by staff and directors of the TV sets that a number of them seem to have acquired, one under each arm in a few cases. This was many, many weeks ago now. I've had a response which showed some invoices which to me didn't seem to even be proper GST invoices. There was no proper description of goods, for instance. Why is it that if you claim that you're now moving towards greater transparency, I as a councillor have to fight for weeks and weeks and weeks to get basic information and still not get that?
Look, we're addressing, I've seen your request and that will be addressed. Again, I'm not going to delve in the past in terms of process and procedures that took place. There's no question that we will be open door and we will respond as soon as there is a request from anyone for information.
Well, in terms of delving into the past, I'm talking about in the last few weeks. Is this what you call history in the past that you don't want to delve into as well?
No, not at all. We're open and we're addressing your questions.
Except that you haven't.
We're doing it now. We're continually getting those questions coming through.
I'm sorry, this line of questioning, in my view, has nothing at all, there's no relevance whatsoever with the paper that we're discussing. I'd like you to rule it.
I would appreciate, Councillor Van der Vis, if you would stick to the paper that the issues that are...
Right, yeah, I apologise that I know the line of questioning isn't a pleasant one for anybody, but if I'm to comment on budget...
The point is not that it's not pleasant or not. The point is whether it's relevant. And I am upholding the point of order to the extent that I'm asking you to stick to the issues in the paper. That's
okay. All right. Okay, my last question then is, given that we've now got another budget in which it's now proposed that we're going to be funneling another number of millions to bail out DVML yet again, what confidence can you give me as a councillor that the old history, 2-3 years, and the recent history is going to fundamentally change? Why should I put more ratepayers' money into a situation which is, from my perspective, been an utter good money after bad situation?
We're going through for everyone, we're going through a significant review of our business at the moment. We're going to see some, it'll be a tough period for us because our review will mean there will be a change of personnel within the business. We're open and committed with council to work through that process. And why we're doing that? We're doing it for a number of reasons. We need to focus on what we need to do to improve the way we operate in the market, because at the moment we're a very operationally driven business and we need to change that focus. So we're going to strip our business apart, which we've done, and we've reviewed that business, and we're going to get a skill set in that will deliver outcomes that we're tying into the budget. And also we're going a long way with Grant at the moment in working back through our numbers line by line to put realistic numbers on the table so we can deliver a budget to give confidence back in. We're not saying it's going to happen overnight. My brief is deliver the budgeted numbers we're going to put forward this year, and then we can move forward.
Are these changes that you're talking about, are they being driven by the current DVML Board of Directors, or are the changes including changing the Board of Directors?
This process is primarily mine, separate to what the council review is. Mine is purely coming in as the new leader of the business to say, where are we, where have we got problems? Where do we need to focus on driving the business forward?
Okay,
If I can just say briefly, Councillor Vendus, when we announced the stadium review, the purpose for the stadium review is that it is abundantly clear to both me and the new Chief Financial Officer that the budgets that the stadium have had in place have been, and the term I used was fundamentally optimistic, that in our view they were unachievable almost certainly from day one, and that the organisation was effectively you could say set up to fail, or set up in a way that it was highly unlikely to be able to deliver on the optimistic budgets that were put in front of us, and that has proven to be. What was announced at the time was a stadium review of both the management and operations of the stadium and the model and funding of the stadium. That includes the nature and structure of the companies, the nature and structure of the boards, and the nature and structure of the management. Terry's picking up the management review, but it is interleaved, if you like, with the full review that Grant is conducting on our behalf, which looks at more than half a dozen different options for the stadium, for the structure of it, to find out the single most cost-effective option and the costs of the various other options on the table, so that councillors can make a decision based on the costs and benefits of each option.
Right. Through the chair, can I ask one question of CEO Bidrose?
If it relates to the...
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you said that the budgets were fundamentally optimistic. Would they still have been fundamentally optimistic if you had taken out $1.2 million of temporary seats, if you'd taken out $1.3 million of a second tranche of new TV systems? If you'd taken out figures like that, that's $2.5 million just on those two issues. Would those budgets then not have been so fundamentally optimistic?
In my opinion, the budgets would still have been fundamentally optimistic. Those capital spend items, it's the ongoing operational budget, the annual operating costs, and the anticipated revenue that are fundamentally optimistic. We now have what we consider to be a realistic budget for the coming year. It's $1.2 million odd short, which this paper seeks to fix. The point of the stadium review is that that in the long term we don't think that, under the current model, the current operating model, we don't think that fixes, plugs the gap either, unless we change the operating model So no, it absolutely would have still been optimistic.
Okay, so I take your point about the operational costs and that these are much higher than anticipated. Does this mean that when, in the early days of the stadium being agreed to, Mr Farry promised us that the new stadium would be much cheaper to run operationally than Carisbrook? Does this mean that that was fundamentally wrong?
I think some of it is that revenue targets were optimistic, and I think in the detail that was reported through the press around the time that we made the announcement of the stadium review, and a number of the players that were on the ground at the time, which didn't include us, actually said yes. That they said they did put optimistic budgets in place, and they were aware of that. Those optimistic budgets have simply not come to pass. So it's not just operational costs, actually primarily it's revenue targets, whether that be private sector funding or event revenue.
Thank you.
Councillor Bizet.
Yes, it's a question for maybe Mr Mackenzie or Ms Bidrose or both. Given that we are having a stadium review and that we're asked this morning to make some decisions with regards to the funding of the cash shortfall and other issues, can you tell me when that review will be finalised? Because the reason I'm asking the question is that we could make a decision today that might have to be tweaked at some later date, in fact, maybe tweaked very soon. Is there no way we can delay this process until such time as we have a look at the review and then make a decision of knowing all the facts? Or do we have to make a decision today because we need to put something into our annual plan?
Yes, we have to make a decision today. When we put out the draft annual plan, you'll recall we made it clear that we knew that the budget for the stadium in the draft annual plan was not going to be sufficient, was going to be short by a matter of around $1 million or more. So we have to put an accurate figure. The stadium review, when it was announced, we always said we were looking to the middle of the year, and we're still on track for the middle of the year. But the implementation of that will take some time, so you still need a budget for next year, which is what this is. When we announced the stadium review, we said we would put in place a budget for the coming financial year that was effectively a stopgap measure while we finish the review. You make a decision on the ongoing decision on what you want to do with the stadium, and then we look to put the permanent budget for whatever that shape of that might be into the long-term plan, and we'll consult using the long-term plan process.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just a little concerned about the answer you made earlier to Councillor van der Vis's question about the OIA request. You said that you'd seen it and it would be responded to. Can you tell us, please, when you saw it and when it will be responded to?
I think we're working with the timeframes and we're responding to the second set of questions. We've had a number from Mr van der Vis. So we're working within the time frame that we've got.
So it will be responded within the statutory period?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
This report really essentially is a carry through from the budget changes yesterday, I think. And I think we're possibly getting into too much detail because essentially how I see it, and maybe I've got it wrong, is that instead we've got a surplus from this year, save some money that we either have to spend this year or carry forward. Yesterday we did a lot of carry forwards. This one, if it's a savings, is it correct to believe that what we're essentially doing today is saying if these are savings or haven't been spent, that we're looking at the best way of meeting our financial strategy, which says debt repayment or invest to save measures, and saying, looking forward, if we do this, we're going to be in a better position for setting the budget for next year. Is that essentially how it works?
So effectively, the first part of it is the savings from this year being put into debt repayment, and the second part is just effectively plugging the gap. So,
yeah,
which is the report that Carolyn talked about yesterday, which you effectively approved.
Yeah. But what we're doing is saying where is it most effective to put that debt repayment, or is this the most effective place to debt repay at the moment for the city going forward?
The part for next year will not be debt repayment.
No, for this year.
For this year.
Yes, because we've got a financial strategy that says if we've got savings,
yes,
we put into debt repayment. Yes. The question to you is, I mean, in some ways this isn't about stadium, it's about the DCC, where we put that debt saving to be best for next year and going forward, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd have to look at the debt profile across the whole organisation and what debt we can pay early or late, because obviously we can't just go and repay any debt at any time, because a lot of it's fixed. So what this is here is an opportunity to pay some debt in DVML that we know we can pay early.
Yep.
And it does give us an opportunity to assist with their budget long term.
But yes, it is debt repayment.
It is debt repayment, but no, my concern here is, and I'm actually probably a tad disappointed with the response. It doesn't worry me, so what I want to do is to make sure that we're putting the debt repayment into what makes the city best off long term, not what makes DVML look best long term. And I think there is a subtle difference there. I actually think that this probably does meet that criteria, but I would like some assurity to that, because it's not about just making DVML look good.
The debt you would like to pay off sooner would be your most expensive?
Yes.
Now, I can't tell you, I don't have the information in front of me now, whether this is our most expensive debt, and also whether we can pay that most expensive debt off.
Because that tends to be fixed, obviously.
Okay, that's an interesting quandary. Thank you.
Councillor Hawke.
Thanks, Your Worship. My question's around recommendation 2. It just seems like we're trying to, it's two things, in that if it is noting that this is an interim solution and that the ongoing budget will depend on the outcome of the stadium review, then why are we approving an annual call on capital of 715,000 per annum rather than a call on capital of 715,000 for the 14-15 year?
The reason that we've worded that way is because if we did it just for one-off, it would drop the rates down in the future years, because it would be seen as a saving, when we all know that it is likely to be a long-term, we're going to need to do something long-term to plug the gap.
Yeah, thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you. And hello, Mr. Davis. The question that I have is just around, if the outcome of this management review or any review of the stadium says, in order to make the stadium operate more efficiently, we need to spend X amount on new capital items, is it your intention to come back to council around that, or would you be making that decision on?
Well, there's two issues. The cap's going to be, we've got a capital expenditure discussion happening now with ECC. As a side, in terms of review, my focus at the moment has been on purely operational and P&L.
The reason I ask is because I think that, and it's entirely not, it doesn't sit with your camp, but I can to a degree understand Councillor Vander's concerns about historic expenditure and the fact that in that context for a ratepayer to have faith that this is going to be, we're not going to be sitting in this situation doing the same thing in another 3 years. No. There is a process in place by which we have oversight of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's part of that. It's part of we're going to be far better planned, and we're going to be far more transparent. So we don't want any surprises. Going back history ago, I don't want any surprises. So everything will be planned early. We'll be up front with DCC, and we want to get everything out on the table.
Can I just add, Councillor McTavish, that DCHL now holds the agency for oversight of DVML and DVL, which means that discussions about capital expenditure are able to be had with Grant, and that means that there is a much simpler information flow process to make sure that we are aware and are able to raise a flag when we have concerns or when we have questions.
Thank you.
Councillor Peck.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's just a question around the revenue side, and I just wondered, you know, there's a forecast drop in revenue for the coming year, and I just wondered if you could just give us a feel for how much
potential there is to actually sell memberships for lounges or corporate boxes or that sort of thing. Could you just give us a picture?
I mean, again, revenue's all dependent on what events we can secure. To be honest with, when I go back in history, we were fairly bullish in terms of some of our revenue projections, and I think that I think it was all in good faith and being as open as possible. But the reality is, we were too aggressive in terms of our forecasting. There's a number of things. We need to tie down our host tenants, obviously, because our membership underpins the Highlanders, for example, say, in Otago Rugby. So that's important for us to move forward and continue that relationship, even though their attendances are declining. We look at when the stadium was first built, average attendances there would have been 14. Last year they were probably 10.5. This year they're about 8.5. So we've got to be realistic in terms of looking beyond today to make a decision to forecast what we think attendances will be. Who knows what's on the horizon with concerts, because the time frame is so long. All we can do is best guess, and all I can give some assurance on is that the way we will forecast moving forward is as open and honest as we can be, probably a little more conservative than we've ever been before. For example, the review we're going through at the moment is only putting in place in the budget known events and those events that we feel are more than 80% chance of getting. So we're stripping everything else out. And of course what comes out with revenue drop is cost though. So, if we're not forecasting X amount of events or X amount of numbers through the doors, our costs will drop as well. But on top of that, we're looking at honing in on skill sets to support driving extra events, to drive more revenue through, rather than just operate events.
Councillor Kelly.
Just a quick one. Do any council-owned or related to or anything, companies have anything to do with any corporate seats anymore? I understand Delta used to have a relationship with a corporate box or whatever down there.
I don't know, Terry.
I can answer that. Yeah, they do. There are a number that have an investment outside of their contractual obligations. Yeah.
Further questions? Right. Well, Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Vincent.
I understand the break-even point for concerts is 60,000 people. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure where that number came from, because the break-even would depend on a lot of factors. The price you pay for the event, the size of the event, I think they all vary. So if I was to look through this next 12 months, the break-even on an event is significantly different for each event.
Do we have any barriers that are stopping some of these events coming to town? Obviously the major ones being transport and logistics and stuff, but what about the second tier?
No, I think the major issues we've got are awareness what we can deliver, which is an obvious one, and we're working hard to get the key promoters down to town. We're meeting with Paul Dainty next week, and his team are coming down to Dunedin to have a look at what can we deliver, which is a first for us. So, we need to work harder at building awareness of what we can deliver. Secondly, we need to partner a little bit better in town. We do have the barriers are clearly airport and hotel rooms are clearly barriers for us, and we've got to just work smarter on trying to overcome that, whether it's timing for tour programming, so we can get rail or sea to bring in staging and equipment, etc. So it's about every event is a little different, and it's about us tailoring and honing in the bid based on the actual size of the event.
Based on what you've seen in the few months you've been here, do you see any potential revenue opportunities coming through that we could tap into?
Look, I think there's when we get our team in place, there is going to be lots of upside in what we already have. I've noticed that we've actually underdone what we have in place at the moment. So we've got a list of members, a significant list of corporate partners, which we actually haven't leveraged off at all. So first and foremost, low-hanging fruit is the people we have. So we're developing a lot of product around those people that we have on, as part of our community now, our investment community, and then we're looking to develop product to take to market as well to grow our revenues.
Okay, and just finally, do you believe there's enough room are we doing proper maintenance and enough room in that area? And in the budget?
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Could I just add to that? That is one of the changes in the budget, that we've actually allowed money for maintenance. It has been minimal in the past, and what we've tried to do is, hey, this is a realistic budget because the building is older and then starts to need more and more maintenance. So.
Councillor Benson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question about the issue of gate attendances that you raised. And obviously, from a casual observation, that's not just a Dunedin problem. And clearly there's a conundrum around the revenues from television and who gets them, and the problematic issue of not having stadia throughout the country to put on these events that people want to watch at home or wherever else. Is there any coordinated effort across the country from stadium managers to discuss with, I guess, primarily the NZRFU and television, the appropriate massaging of revenue flows in this respect?
Yeah, it's a good question, through the Chair. It's a good question. It's an issue that's been going on for a number of years. My background from Adelaide Oval was cricket. When I first joined the South Australian Cricket Association, Adelaide Oval, total cricket revenue in Australia was about 10% of total revenue. So, you know, the gate was very important. So people coming to the gate was very important. When I left, it was 0.01%. I think the governing sporting bodies are concerned, probably not from a revenue perspective, but from a fan engagement and a TV experience perspective. So I can assure you that New Zealand Rugby will be absolutely concerned about declining numbers at, say, Highlanders matches, because it doesn't deliver the TV experience when people are watching to empty stadium. That drives their revenue as well, or supports their revenue. So it's a challenge. Everyone's on the case. I think what we're trying to do as Stadia is change the way we deliver our content to make it more of an event experience than just going to the rugby, for example's sake. So it's a consistent issue across all sporting bodies and venues.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question, there's been a few submissions through the hearings last week, and not to be heard, sceptical of the value to the community of our Events Attraction Fund.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us what that has been spent on this year, whether it has been spent, and what measurements of benefit.
Well, and through the Chair, it's that attraction fund is a critical tool for us running our business. We're running economic study impacts now, closely aligned to the events where we utilise that fund. We haven't spent a lot of that fund this year because the nature of the business is that you forward book. So there is a provision of use of that for future events. And every event that's tied to now, we automatically drive the economic benefit, which is a measure of the use of that fund.
I'll just add, I was speaking to a CEO of a major retailer in town on the plane last week, and asked them what can the council do for them, and their comment was bring more events, because it's like Christmas every day.
Well,
an event.
Just to give a bit of a summary, and we haven't gone public yet, that we've done an analysis on all of our events to date. It would be around $45 million worth of economic benefit to the city. So Elton John, for example, say it would have been $13 million of benefit. With events like concerts, and Elton John's a good example, 58% of tickets sold were outside of Dunedin.
And is that money being spent on our operational costs, or...?
No, this is just pure economic benefit to the city, utilised from that funding that we tap into to secure that event. There is commercial benefit back to DVML, but there is also indirect benefit to the city where people stay in the hotel, they get a cab, all of those, that benefit.
But how, in this financial year, how many events have accessed that fund?
There's only... there's about 80,000 spent, I can't remember, 85,000 we've spent. I can't remember off the top of my head. But going forward, we've tapped into most of that for upcoming bids for this financial year that we're budgeting now.
Thanks.
Councillor Vanders.
You talked about Elton John just now and the economic benefits that supposedly went to the city. We hear a lot of these estimations on a fairly regular basis. You also said that concerts like the Elton John concert also had a commercial benefit back to DVML. Is it not the case that in the case of Elton John, there was no payment for the stadium hire at all? And that there would only have been a commercial benefit back to DVML if there had been a second night that was sold out?
No, well, that's not correct. There was no payment for them to play, but we get indirect revenues through catering. We get indirect revenues through ticket rebates. We get indirect revenues through merchandise sales. So there's no question there would have been revenues that would have come back through for DVML.
Even if you don't charge for the stadium?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, stadium rent's nothing. It's about how you package the whole deal. And every case is different. Depending on the event that comes in, we repackage it, and it might be that we don't do a rental one day, but we might get a significantly higher ticket rebate, or we might take a share of the gate after X amount. So this is quite a sophisticated business with the promoters, and every promoter is different. Elton John, we made money on, for sure, and the city would have benefited significantly what they did.
Okay. Questions for Grant on the recommendations. Recommendation 1 says that we approve a payment to DVML for a one-off call-on capital of 2.271 million. A one-off call-on capital, is that from the 800 million uncalled capital that we have? Where does that capital call come from?
This is a capital call from DVML. They've got uncalled capital in their equity.
How much uncalled capital do they have?
I don't know off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay. This call on capital, is this just a technical term for new debt?
No. No, it's equity. It's shareholders' funds.
So it's sort of like money you get from selling bonds to yourself?
No, this is us investing in the business. So it's just like if we were buying shares, or call on capital in Meridian Energy or any other entity.
Okay, so in this case, it's the DCC buying more shares in the stadium.
In this case, it's DVML calling on the DCC to put some money in.
Yes, yeah, I realise that it's us putting the money in.
Because what happens is that the company has got uncalled capital and they can call that up at any time.
That's the worry. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Worship. Just following on from Councillor Hawkins' question in relation to the events fund, when we initially moved that fund be put towards the purpose for which we have established it, we did ask that we got an annual report looking at the benefits of that fund, and I appreciate that given that you have only spent $85,000 of it, it may be difficult to do that, but I for one would value that the information coming to us so that we can have some way of judging the benefits of that fund. So
it's a very good question. That is coming. We're doing that now. Again, part of this transparency and us being very accountable for that money, that's in process now. So,
along with community access.
And community access, yeah. That's right.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm just wondering if in your last response that you may have answered my question. I'm still concerned as to why we've decided this particular debt be repaid, but you've just said that the company has called upon the council to help and it has the ability to call. What is the liability it has to call?
So the council, the company has not technically called on it.
Okay.
This is our suggested solution for it. So
I'm just slightly concerned about the process here, in that I would like to have thought there was a higher level, that there was almost a paper saying, actually we've got the surplus, which we've got in, I think, report 2, it's giving us a line, but then saying which is the best way on a number of factors, and maybe debt servicing, that may be on company structures, but I feel like it's slightly fudged the way we've done this, and that we've found something that's convenient, but I don't have the surety that it's the best use of that money. And that's where I'm feeling really concerned, and I'm not quite sure what the process was to get us to this point. Was it because this was a convenient thing, or is it that this is the best debt repayment?
There's a 4-year, there's a repayment plan in place for this tranche of debt from the stadium. The stadium are $1.2-ish million short on meeting their budget for next year. Paying this debt off early frees up money so that we have to put less cash injection into the shortfall for DVML, which means that within your 3% rate cap, we're able to make good the shortfall without you having to have a 3.8% or a 4% rates rise. The downside of that is that this is the debt that's being paid off. It's able to be paid off, as opposed to perhaps we could pay off a little bit of council debt rather than DVML debt. In essence, though, the information that we're now putting out into the public arena is around the total family debt. So, from that sense, we are paying off some of the total family debt.
I don't have a problem with that.
The question for you is whether the interest rate on this debt makes this the most appealing debt for us to pay off, or whether we should pay off another piece of debt and give them a bigger handout, if you like, which would be the other side.
I think you've actually given it, because it doesn't have to just be in interest payments. It's about what makes the city and the ratepayers better off.
Yes.
And there's just a small bit that hasn't been closed in that discussion. And it may be that what you've just said being the liability of a rates rise.
Yes. That we have tried to do that without breaching your self-imposed financial cap for the level of rates rise. So we went into the draft budget with $179,000 to spare, with Grant knowing he had to find another $1.2 million from somewhere. Paying this debt off and paying off that $15 million worth we talked about yesterday frees up interest rate repayments. It's not free, being really clear. None of this for the stadium is a free ride. So this is money we're putting into the stadium that you could be putting into
a lot of things.
Logan Park AstroTurf, or something that you're not doing.
Or speeding up cycleways. But
the question is, we own the stadium and they have got a shortfall, and at this point in time you haven't made a decision to close it down, therefore we need to make sure it's viable.
But yeah, you can see the point. I'm just trying to join the dots. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, Councillor Thompson.
I don't know whether you'll know the answer to this off the top of your head, but I have made an assumption, correctly or incorrectly, that the nature of the debt that this will be repaying in DVML is it's been debt provided, it's been vendor financed in some instances, and short-term financed in some instances, and the interest rate on that kind of debt is, in my experience, usually greater than the interest rate that the council is paying for its debt, whether fixed or unfixed, and I would assume that that was the case in this instance as well.
I can only comment that it is vendor finance. I can't recall what the interest rates were and what the interest rates, because there's not just one loan, there's about 3 loans.
I understand that, yeah.
So,
my question really relates to the question that Councillor Wilson is asking.
Yes.
I just find it, but it's going slow.
No further questions. Councillor Staines, you've indicated you'll move the recommendations. Is there a second? Councillor Lord. Discussion. Would you want to speak to discussion? Councillor Banks.
As I've suggested already in question time, it's my belief that very little has changed in the entire history, and I keep hearing a reference to history, and bear in mind that history here is only the last 3 years. Very little has changed in the history of the running of the stadium. It has, from the beginning, been anything other than transparent. It has, from the beginning, been in blatant disregard of the statement of intent in terms not just of capital expenditure, but in terms of reporting back to council, and in terms of the transparency that Mr Davies has just said that they're going to improve. I have not seen anything that would convince me that throwing more millions at stadium operation is going to actually do anything other than maintain a status quo of basically an out-of-control council organisation that continues to spend money and continues to spend money on in vast amounts on things that I don't believe the ratepayers would want to have any truck with. The original 94 TV sets, the flat screen TVs that the stadium had, were a significant expense, but you could perhaps justify in saying, having them and saying that, you know, your corporate boxes really need to have those TV screens in order to present a kind of experience. And I accept what Mr Davies says, that you really do need to have a proper experience at the stadium if it is to function. I've got no problem with that at all. However, for DVML to turn around and then buy a whole other set of TVs and a control system with a cost of $1.3 million and not even ask us about it, to me is evidence that this is an organisation that simply will spend whatever it likes, knowing that it can come to us and every year we will simply throw more millions at them and bail them out. I don't believe that's acceptable. I don't believe that we can justify any of the expense recommendation in today's paper. I will be voting against recommendations 1 and 2 in the hope that the previous understanding that we would always bail out whatever DVML did will be an understanding that just isn't there anymore.
I'm going to be supporting this. I mean, it grieves me that this is an ongoing situation, but that's the world we're in. This, if we didn't make this motion today, or if we took all voted against it, my understanding, but I may be incorrect, is that this money would by nature go to debt repayment anyway, because it's in savings from this year. How that is then done wouldn't necessarily come back to council. It may well be done by staff. This is the direction of our governance, our Chief Financial Officer and our CEO to do it this way to get the best benefit for the council and to the ratepayer. I have confidence in them. Albeit I wish we'd had a slightly easier report to do that. And to that end, I think it is again a requirement that we make the decisions rather than default to staff to make these decisions. I think this makes sense to do it. I don't know why anyone wouldn't vote constructively to get the rate situation in the best position for the ratepayer of Dunedin.
Councillor Thompson.
Look, I don't think any of us think that this is a desirable situation, but it is, in my view, the most sensible way to handle the situation. Councillor Vandervis suggests that we shouldn't vote for this, and he does so from some sort of moral high ground that absolves him from the responsibility of having to explain what he would do.
Point of order.
Point of order.
There is no question that I'm speaking from moral high ground. It's simple economics.
That's not a point of order.
I'm grateful to Councillor Vandervis for confirming that I am correct. But his moral high ground absolves him, it appears, from the responsibility of explaining what he would do when DVML is therefore unable to make its commitment, whether to repayment of the loans that it is scheduled to repay or its commitment to DVL and therefore their commitment to repay the loans that they're scheduled to repay. And it absolves him from the responsibility of having to address who ultimately becomes the guarantor for those loans, which is this organisation here through the Dunedin City Treasury Limited, which is lending them the money. So ultimately we will have to pay one way or the other. if we have to pay one way or the other, then it makes sense to do it in the way that is most sensible. And that is purely what this is. And so we should be finding the most sensible way to deal with a difficult problem. I know that there are people who believe that the sensible way to deal with this problem is to, in fact, not make the payment and close the place down. Well, you know, that's career enhancing in the same way as becoming a kamikaze pilot is career enhancing. It simply means that you end up with a train smash which you still have to pay for. And so for me, this is about buying time to make some changes that fundamentally have to be made. Where I do agree with Councillor Van der Vis is that we have not been well served by either the attitude or the actions of DVML and DVML primarily in terms of some of the ways in which it has gone about things, and that does not help this council in making these kinds of decisions. So I think that the indication is that's been taken on board. I hope that it has been taken on board, but this is the only sensible way in my view to proceed in the short term.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Bishop. Councillor Thompson said things much more articulately than I can say them, but I just want to thank both the Chief Financial Officer and DVML and and Councillor Thompson and Councillor Calvert in terms of the finance side of this, because I think it is a really difficult situation, and it's not a situation that we would wish ourselves to be in, but frankly, it is a situation that we have to deal with, and as Councillor Thompson has articulated, need to deal with in the most sensible way so that we have time to work through the review that the Chief Executive has initiated in the most sensible way, and to do any alternative to what we have in front of us would not enhance our ability to conduct our review in a sensible fashion. It would be seriously deleterious to that outcome. So I'm going to support this from that perspective, knowing that the review is underway, knowing that one of the things that the Chief Executive has explicitly stated that she will be looking into is whether or not it makes sense for us to keep this thing open. So, but rushing that and effectively signing off on a default by default is not the way to do that or get to the right outcome. So this is an interim measure. It's not an ideal situation, but I don't think that we have any alternative answer which would give us a better outcome.
Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the first time I've had to make a comment on our stadium, and you know, I thank Councillor Van der Vis for pointing out some of the issues, and he has a longer history than me here around this table, but I do feel that we are in a holding pattern in terms of this stadium, and in kind of a time of wonder about just how it's going to meet its potential to turn a profit. I'm sure all ratepayers are looking forward to the day when we can find it, you know, that the stadium does pay its way in terms of revenue versus expenditure in 1 year. I know the debt, of course, is sort of hanging over everything, but I wish Terry Davies all the best for trying to get us on a path to make that profit, and I'm hoping that his ideas will come to fruition with concerts and other events there that will give us a hope that we have an asset in the city, not something that's really pulling us down.
Councillor.
Look, I'm going to support this. I obviously do because I seconded it, but the reason why I'm going to support it is because it's my belief that stadiums worldwide very seldom ever make a profit. I think they don't make a profit like libraries don't make profits, like swimming pools don't make profits, like museums don't make profits, but they're what you call social capital. And I never use the library, but I use the stadium often. It's not because I can't read, it's just because I choose not to go to the library. They don't have colouring books. But that was wee joke. No, but I think it's really important that we sit there and we make the decision. The decision was made by previous councils to have a stadium. And there were a lot of people when that decision made that weren't happy with it, and I was one myself, submitted against it. And the reason I submitted against it was because I thought it was too expensive for what we got, just like I don't own a Lamborghini. But the decision was made to have one. It's been a wonderful asset in terms of, well, perhaps the asset's the wrong thing. It's been a wonderful venue in terms of people have had an awful lot of good times there. It does, when we have a big event at the stadium, we have excitement around the city, and things like the Rugby World Cup, to me, were really quite a special time. I think going forward, this is probably never going to pay its way in the sense that it's going to have money coming back out of it. But it might get to the stage in a few years' time when we get the debt down to where it breaks even, or to maybe shows a small profit which can then be reinvested for putting a new roof on or whatever else it needs, new bolts or new seats or new TVs even. But what I think is important is that we don't look like a bunch of idiots when we go to the point, and like I would hope that we never ever get to the stage where we think we're going to close this down, because the signals that we're sending our city and our community, to me, are pretty important. And I don't want to ever send a signal that something can't be done. And yes, the cost is there, the cost is on the ratepayer. And as I've always said, I would have loved to have seen it as a UAGC so that I could pay $80 or $90 or even $110 instead of $1,200 or $2,000. But I think we just got to move on. We've got to get this debt down. We've got to be fiscally tight like we are. I'm confident that the CEO has clearly identified a path through the review, and I'm sure we're going to get the best outcome. But I think the best outcome is always still going to be pay off that debt. And so that's why I'm supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Benson-Park.
Most of it's just been said, Mr Chairman. I think it's really important that we don't develop an expectation, while we have high expectations of management of this facility, we don't develop in the community an expectation that it's going to create a profit. I mean, stadia do not make money. They might get close to breaking even, but most of them don't. What is it? International experience tells us there's one in the world that does, for various ownership reasons. And so I don't think in a city this size we should have that expectation, but that's not to say that we shouldn't have very high expectations of maximising the use of what is a necessary facility, actually. And I think we're moving in that direction, I hope.
I'll just speak briefly before you do, Councillor Staines. Look, the reasons for supporting these recommendations have been articulated very, very well around the table. But I just want to put it in really plain terms. There's debt. We've got debt, and we're going to have to pay it off. We're going to have to pay it off whether the stadium makes a profit, whether it doesn't, whether it's open, whether it's closed, whatever. That debt has to be paid. And this seems to me a very intelligent way of working through how to pay it off. And in the context of that debt repayment, I think it would be good to be a bit clearer sometimes when we talk about the cost of the stadium per year. It's something like just a bit under 10 million. The vast bulk of that is debt repayment. The stadium does not cost us $10 million a year in operational costs. And as I say, the debt will have to be paid. It's family debt and it's going to be paid. So this seems to me a small step in some ways in the context of all that debt, but it's a small step and it's a very intelligent step, and it achieves some other outcomes both for the ratepayer, the community, and for DVML at the same time going forward. So I support this. Councillors, just before you do, the Chief Executive's got a couple of clarifications.
I do have an update on the cost of this debt versus other debt that we could pay down. So this is two tranches of debt, one at 5.1% and one at 5.57%. There are slightly different amounts. So if you do the calculations, the average cost across those is 5.297%. Our other floating debt that we could pay off instead is 5.27. So in fact, this is smidgen hot, the smidgen on the end of being the better debt to pay off rather than the worst debt to pay off. With regard to Councillor Vandervis's question about uncalled capital, the stadium has $5.69 million of uncalled capital facility that they could call on us to assist them to pay debt or costs. That wouldn't happen without coming back to council, so that would come back here for decision making, but that facility is available to them to make that request.
Thank you. Councillor Stubbs.
I think Councillor Lord and Councillor Thompson have expressed pretty well the situation we are in, and the reality is we have a stadium. That stadium is a business. It's making a loss. Probably more because it cost more than it can sustain in terms of the events that it can attract. And that creates the hole. But as Mayor Cull has said, we have the debt. That debt has to be paid. Our role, and particularly Mr Davies' role, is to try and operate the stadium. So put aside the cost of interest and the repayment of the loans. The real trick here is to operate the stadium without making an operational loss. And I'm heartened to hear Mr Davies making comments on the work that he is doing now to tune the stadium's operational costs to the kind of business that it expects to come through the door in a realistic way. That should end up balancing the operational costs against its revenues and at least stem that much. I think the thing that we have to remember, and the comment's been made, that stadiums all around the world don't make money themselves. But this stadium is an exceptional stadium. It's an exceptional place to go and watch sport, to go and watch a concert. And at the end of the day, we have to think more globally in what are the benefits. We wouldn't have built a stadium here to make money from building a stadium. The stadium was built on the basis that it would attract money to the city. And while I voted against it, and primarily on the basis that the debt levels were going to be such a great burden that it would come home to roost, the good thing is that when we get an event in there, the flow-on effect in our economy is significant. So the trick for us is, one, have the stadium operate without any operational loss, and secondly, to get events that are significant enough in the stadium that it brings an indirect benefit to the city in terms of significant cash flows coming here from the people outside the city who visit us to see those events. So I think we are doing a review, we are doing a review to look at whether the company can be structured in a better way, whether the whole thing can be set up to be more realistic. From the stadium point of view, we're doing the work on operational costs and seeking better chance of getting events. In the interim, we have little choice but to make the ends meet. And these resolutions do that. So I would urge you to vote for them.
Thank you. That's in discussion. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded, please.
That's carried.